How's it going, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. As you can see, we have got a buttload of snow. I mean, it started snowing like a week ago and it never let up. So we've got all of this snow, and I've only actually been out riding a couple of times. It's sort of killing me in one respect, but for starters, by the time I finish, clearing the snow off the decks and clearing it off the boats and pulling it off the sheds and getting my driveway all blown out and cleaning my cars, I'm just too tired to get out there. So anyway, then I get on my new sled, get ready to go out and do a video for you guys, and it just won't start. And I was so frustrated. I tried starting it for 10 or 15 minutes, and again, I was just too cold and too tired at that point to even bother with it. So I went to bed. The one thing it's doing, it's fouling plugs. So I'm taking the plugs out and they're soaking wet, drying them off. I can get it going, then it stalls again. So I'm trying to go through all these things in my head. What would make this thing flood out? Why are my plugs wet like this? So is the air intake blocked so it's not getting air, so it's running too rich? Going through all of these things. Now, I had just put a brand new set of plugs in this as well. So when I took the old plugs out, these were actually BR8 ECS. And they're actually not supposed to be. When you look in the manual, they're BR9 ECS. So I jumped on the forums and started digging through. And sure enough, after this machine came out, they did switch them up to the BR8 ECS. It's just a little bit hotter plug. Anyway, so I did go out and buy a couple of new BR8 ECS. All right, so fingers crossed it's something simple like that, because I know the rest of the sled is in pretty good shape. I've got 135 PSI in each cylinder, so it's not a compression issue. Let's try these plugs and hope for the best. All right, guys, a little prayer to the snowmobile gods. That's it. All right, guys, I think now we can get to today's video. All right, so now that's out of the way, let's get to the video that I was planning to do, and that's tips for riding at night. So I've had this request a couple of times recently. Top Shot 2424 and Bryce Taylor both asked me if I could give you some tips for riding at night. Now, I gotta admit, I don't do a ton of night riding. I do ride at night sometimes, and it is a lot of fun. There's a couple of reasons that people do it. Firstly, when you're riding at night, it's a completely different experience. And I used to scuba dive at night, actually. And it's the same kind of thing. You're very isolated. Everything around you is dark. All you see is what's in your headlights. A lot of times when you're out riding at night, there's nobody else around, so you get the trails all to yourself. You might just be out riding at night just so you can squeeze some more hours in. Some of the winters we've had lately, depending on where you are, you may not be getting the time on the snow you want, so riding at night gives you a couple more hours out there. Or maybe you're just out and it starts to get dark on your way home. So riding at night can be a lot of fun. It does have its own sort of set of risks, so it's not a bad idea to go through a few tips. So my first tip, it may seem obvious, it may seem really simple, but check all of the lights on your sled before you take it out at night. So check your headlight, check your high beam, check your tail light and your brake light, and even your dash lights. My next tip would be make sure that you clear any snow and ice that builds up on those lights while you're riding. So obviously, if you're riding in deeper snow, you're going to get snow and ice thrown up onto your hood that can block your headlight, and you can be throwing up snow in the back and cover your tail light as well. All right, so my 2005 has a dual headlight, so it's probably unlikely that they're both going to burn out while I'm riding. This one has one headlight. I'd say it's not a bad idea to carry a spare bulb with you out on the trail, just in case one goes out. My next tip is about where you ride. So remember, it's hard enough during the day to see things. If you're riding in deeper snow or in an unfamiliar area, it's hard enough to see things like tree stumps and rocks that are buried in the snow. And even if you're riding out on a lake where you think it's probably wide open, you can get things that are frozen in the ice, or things like dock pilings and that. They're frozen in the ice and then they're covered with snow. So that kind of stuff is super hard to see at night. So I would say stick to things like groomed trails, open areas, places that you're familiar with. Now, I just did a video about riding alone, and most of the snowmobile training courses, they're going to emphasize, riding with somebody, right? The buddy system, or not being out there by yourself. But at night, I think it's even more important that you're not riding by yourself, because if your sled breaks down and you have no lights, it's just that much worse if you're by yourself. My next tip is kind of stay in the mindset where you're prepared to stop suddenly. Maybe ride with sort of one finger loosely on the brake lever, and just be planning to stop suddenly, because things will come up really fast at night. Especially things like wildlife tend to be out at night, and they tend to be walking in places like trails where the walking is a little easier. Up where I live, we quite often have animals, things like deer and coyotes and stuff like that run out onto the road in kind of the evening hours. So yeah, just be prepared to stop suddenly. Now, if you're riding on a trail, especially where you think there are going to be other riders that may be coming along, remember, once you shut the sled down, you're probably not going to have any lights. So if you do have to stop, try and position the snowmobile off to the side of the trail or somewhere where it's less likely that somebody is going to hit you if they come around a corner. The other tip, and it seems really obvious, is always make sure you carry a flashlight with you when you're out at night. You know, once you shut your sled off, you're not going to have any lights. So that's one obvious reason. You may have to walk out if you are by yourself. And again, you want to have a flashlight with you. So I usually just carry one of these little LED flashlights. You know, usually they last a long time. They don't use a lot of battery. They're inexpensive and they're small enough that I can throw one in the trunk or in my saddlebags. You know, along the same line, you should always carry some alternate light source. Like flares aren't a bad idea. So if you think about it, you're out there and you're broken down, you don't want somebody hitting you, so you want to be as visible as you can be. So, you know, flares aren't a bad idea. LED flashers. So you can buy a lot of inexpensive little LED flashers that you can turn on and stick it to your sled so that people can see you. Okay, along the line of that alternate light source, if you can get something that mounts to your helmet, so even those sort of headlights that you can buy with the band, some of those bands are going to be big enough to go around a helmet. You know, I know the BV2S helmet I have, you can buy a flashlight that mounts to the side of it. The advantage to having a light here on your helmet is if your headlight goes out and you don't have a spare bulb, that's probably going to be enough to get you home. If you ride slow, it should light up enough in front of you that you can see where you're going. It's also directional, right? So while you're riding, you can look off to the side because all you're going to see is what's directly in front of the sled in the headlight. But if you've got a light on your helmet, you can turn the head and you can see off the side of the trail. So those headlights actually are a pretty good idea to have with you as well. Okay, my last tip, and I think this is by far the most important, reduce your speed when you're riding at night. And I know some guys are going to groan about that because people like to ride fast, and I get that. But especially when you're riding at night, you've got to ride at a reasonable speed. Things come up at you so quick when you're riding in the dark. You know, even when I was out shooting a little bit of video for this video, there was somebody out walking their dog and they just kind of appeared out of nowhere. And even though they had a light, I kind of, for a second, I thought it was the reflection of my headlights, and then I realized it was a person. So if you're riding too fast, your headlight is going to illuminate about 200 feet in front of your sled. So if you're doing more than sort of 40, 45 miles an hour, you're going to actually overshoot that 200 feet. And what I mean by that is your typical reaction time to see something react and like brake is going to be about 1.5 seconds. So if you're doing much more than that, you're going to overshoot that 200 feet of that you can see in your headlight. And obviously you can run into something, or more importantly, someone. So reduce your speed when you're riding at night. All right, guys, so I think that's it for this video. I think that's my top tips for riding at night. So Top Shot and Bryce, I hope that answers your question. Now I put it over to you guys. If any of you guys have any other tips or suggestions for when you're out riding at night, post something in the comments below. All right, guys, that's it for me. If you found that video helpful, I hope you take a second and click that thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, you're new to snowmobiling, you're looking for some tips and tricks, think about subscribing, click the little bell icon, and you'll get notified when I post some new content. So until next time, I'm Dave Clark, and thanks for taking the time to watch. All right, now let's get on to the video that I was going to start to do of riding with the winters that we've had lately. We've had it. I'd also say it's not